All right, I found this article. Talks about nursing surplus. Anybody believe that there's a nursing surplus? The article basically says, I'm just going to summarize it, that there's about 43% of newly licensed RNs that are unable to find work. And it's been up to 18 months after they graduated. And they state different reasons as to why this may be the case. Mostly related to the recession. Typically, a lot of nurses will work and then leave to focus on their family, have kids. But because of the recession, people aren't leaving their jobs anymore, which is kind of causing a backlog of those that are graduating not to be able to find work. So my question to you guys is, and we'll do this, if not every class, almost every class, we'll talk about some type of current event to start the class out. But my question to you guys is, how do you think this situation would affect you guys as managers and supervisors in your organizations, or just as a healthcare manager in general?
Basically, since if they're overstaffed in nursing and you go into a manager position and you're having to find people who are places for nurses that you have maternity leave and you have things, but they're not actually leaving their job, they're just on vacation. It's kind of hard to put somebody in that position and say, hey, you're going to work here for 2-3 months and then, you know, we got to boot you out, because so it makes it kind of hard to make sure that you're fully staffed all the time.
Okay, so staffing. Anything else?
I think it would allow you to be more picky with the people that you're hiring. So then, you know, which is good in some ways, because, you know, at one time they're just hiring any nurse. If you graduated and passed your boards, you're hired. There was, you know, there was no selection process. And now I guess you could have a, you know, a higher standard on selection.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. That's a good one. Anybody else?
Who's to say once we graduate that it won't take us this 18 months to find a job? Maybe the health managers are still there in their positions. Well, you know, same problem.
It could be the case. I think that they're focusing on nurses right now per se, because that's an industry or you know, a career path that mostly women take. Whereas healthcare management, actually, while we have, you know, majority women in our classes, it's really, you know, as far as healthcare managers go, it's really more so dominated by males on a you know, larger scheme of things. So I don't anticipate that it will be as big of a problem. Sure, it'll be an issue. It's going to be an issue regardless of what industry you go in, because everybody's keeping their job, regardless of if they're in healthcare or business, if they're white collar, blue collar. This is an issue that's happening everywhere. So it might be, you know, it's a valid concern to have, but I don't think we'll be looking at the same numbers, you know, such as 43%. You know, on the flip side, you know, we have people living longer. Even here in Fayetteville, we have construction going on around town where they're building facilities. So there's going to be a need, you know, for healthcare managers. Some of that will depend on how many people are like you all and going to school for this discipline or this degree. We know that nursing schools are always full, but you know, we would have to take a look at the numbers as far as people going to get education in healthcare management to see also if it's going to be as big of an issue. If there's not as many people, you know, graduating with this type of education, then you won't have a problem. But again, you know, with nursing, you know, you can go through a 2-year school, you can go through 4-year school, so there's tons and tons of people that's getting education as a nurse. The numbers aren't nearly as big for people in healthcare management. Anything else you can think of? What about new opportunities, new business opportunities as a healthcare manager? Think about the pool of nurses. Obviously, that's very large, of people who need work. What if you wanted to start your own company, start a staffing company or a private duty nursing company? Like, this would be a great opportunity. Seeing these numbers, you know, as a manager, could be a good opportunity to capitalize on the surplus. Because like you said, while people may not be quitting, they may be taking vacations, they're gonna need somebody to staff during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody were to come in with a business and say, hey, I have a staffing company, I can staff, your floors until your nurses come back.
Right.
So that could be an option as well.
Kind of like manpower.
Yeah,
and they
exactly.
put in
But
for-
specialized for nurses.
Yeah.
So, that could be an option too, as
And
somebody in
nobody does that
healthcare
either.
management.
Nobody does the surplus, like the staffing for nurses. They don't have too many places that put in like for companies. They have the home health staffing, but you don't have too many people that you can call and be like, hey, well, I need a job. Are there any openings where somebody's got on maternity leave? Is somebody, out of town, vacation, whatever? They don't have really too much for nurses.
Yeah.
For everybody else, but not nurses.
At one time, there was a lot of staffing jobs, and staffing, you may not get the best benefits, and the hours are so sporadic, but the pay is better, it's greater than when you're on full-time at a nursing home facility, long-term care facility, or a hospital.
Right.
But they do use a lot, but that does lead to issues, though, in continuity of care in your facilities, too, when you have a lot of staff, temporary staff.
As well as just employee relations in general. So does anybody else have anything to say about this article? Just thought it was interesting, so thought we would share it, talk about it in
I
class.
just never thought I'd see that. I don't know.
And I have also posted a link to this article if you want to read the whole thing. It's on the announcement board if you want to read it later. So we have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to just jump right into it and pick up where we left off on Thursday. This was the next slide that we didn't get to. So we're going to talk a little bit about planning today. This is something that we already went over in HMT 110 a little bit, but we're going to go over it again because it's so important, especially as a manager. Planning is something, the second bullet is very important. Planning is something that should obviously precede all other functions. This should be one of the first things that you do before you do anything else. Can anybody tell me why?
Because you don't plan, you don't know what you need to do, what needs to be done.
You're going to be completely lost. So it's important to have a good plan. It's obviously going to improve the likelihood of you being efficient, saving time, probably saving money. And it also improves your chances of doing things right the first time rather than having to go back and do it again because you didn't plan out things thoroughly. In healthcare, a lot of times, you already have a lot of last minute things that just come up. So planning kind of helps you to be proactive and be able to plan for the things that you can control, knowing that you're already going to face some things probably on a daily basis that you can't control just because of the nature of the industry. As I mentioned, we talked about these things in HMT 110, components of planning, vision, mission, goals, objectives, action plans. Those are all key components of planning. Something that's very important that I've, personally experienced is that during the planning process, it's very important to have your upper level management on board with you. Meaning at the very top, like your president or your CEO or vice president or whoever it may be. Because what happens when you don't do that is you craft out this great plan, put it together, looks good, you wrap it up, and then you send it up the chain and they don't like it. So it's important to get them involved on the front end during the planning stage so that they're involved, they can tell you then if they don't like something so that you can fix it, rather than spending a lot of time putting together this grand scheme and then it comes back to you that you have to totally redo the whole thing all over again. It's important to make sure that you involve quality tools and techniques when you're doing your planning. Can anybody give me an example of a good tool for planning that we talked about? Class. SWOT. Right?
Oh, yeah.
SWOT analysis is a great tool that you can use during the planning process. Again, it's using a tool like that is going to help you to be more efficient and effective in your planning process. It'll help you to think of things that you may forget otherwise if you don't use a tool like that. It's also important that you make sure that you don't just throw a plan together, that you actually take the time to put it together so that you're able to really carry out everything that's in your plan. And of course, make sure you empower your employees, involve them also in the planning process. Sometimes, you know, the people that report to you have really good ideas. You know, yeah, you're in charge, you're the manager. Yeah, you may have, you know, overall more knowledge and more skills than your employees, but they are the ones, you know, carrying out the work every single day. And sometimes they can actually have very good ideas. And so you should always try to empower them and involve them in the planning process as much as you can also. So action plan steps. Let's take an example of something that we want to fix, or let's say customer complaints, patient complaints. Obviously, that would be our problem that we're identifying. How could we obtain and analyze data?
Talk to employees.
Talk to employees.
Customer surveys.
Customer surveys. Little suggestion box.
You can even talk to your residents, your patients. Go by and just ask simple questions. How do you feel today? Is your care okay? You know, just to see it, just generalize how everything is going throughout the day.
What about family?
Yeah, family.
Talk to family. What about other employees? They may have vital information. Maybe they had received a complaint about something that day and you did it. So, you know, also talking to, you know, during lunch or whatever, talking to your employees. Those are all good ways. You all mentioned good ways. So the next step, if our problem is patient complaints, next we gotta determine what's the best action. What do you think would be the best action for this situation?
Depending on the problem, you can do retraining, re-education on how to do your patient care, or your ethical, you know, demands of your job, or however it's flowing with the complaints. You might need to retrain your staff on how to carry out.
Staff. Anything else? Like you said, I think it depends on the complaint. If food is a complaint, then maybe
go to the kitchen.
Talk to dietary, figure out what's going on, and then carrying out the plan. All right, so we figured out what the best action is going to be. How are we going to physically, or how are we going to carry out the plan? We've retrained our staff. Then what? What's next?
You have to implement it.
How?
You have to make sure that everybody understands what's going on, and you have to be the one that's on task to lead them to make sure that everything is okay, that the plan that you're setting out is being carried out step by step.
So leading by example.
Yeah.
We have to show them. Okay? Any other ways to carry out the plan? All right, and then the last step will be to monitor progress, reporting just how we do that. Same thing as the beginning, right? We go back again and we take another look at the surveys and take another to see if there's any change. And if there hasn't been, then that means we need to readjust, right? All right. So I took this from the book. It just says, plans are rarely realized exactly as planned. Anybody agree with that? Mm-hmm. Happens all the time, right? Changes are usually needed along the way. Most often, it is a process of planning that proves most valuable. So again, you know, if we use this example still of patient complaints, we have this great plan, exactly what we're going to do, but how often does it play out that way?
Never.
You always have somebody that may forget to do something, or you've been doing something a certain way so long that it's hard to change, to make that improvement. But that doesn't devalue the planning process. It still needs to be done, regardless of if things don't necessarily always go as planned. Doesn't mean that you still don't need one. You know, even if we think in terms of a team strategy, every team's going to have a strategy. Doesn't mean that they're going to win every game. but they still gotta have a strategy every time they go into the game. Otherwise, it's just gonna be complete chaos.
You have to tweak it the way it feels as it's going along. You have to make your adjustments to make sure that it's getting done the way it needs to be done.
Right. So we just kind of talked about this, how things don't always go as planned. We have people trying to do shortcuts or just trying to avoid the process altogether. And why do you think that happens?
They're lazy.
Lazy? Any other reason?
Just lazy.
Can't think of any other reason? Rebellion, maybe? Or if they don't like their manager, they just don't want to do it.
Some people are just really resistant to change.
Resistant to change, exactly.
Even if it isn't working, they just don't like changing.
I think in terms of specifically in healthcare, what other reasons why? What other reasons why? You know, someone might not.
Understaffing could happen too, to where they don't have the time
Exactly.
to actually get everything done. So
Don't
they
have the
have
time.
to cut corners in order to get it done.
So many times I've been the person on the planning end, creating plans, putting them together, and then we roll them out to the employees, and they look at us like we're crazy. Like, we don't have time to do this. You know, we're already busy. We're already struggling to get everything done. We're having to chart. We're having to, you know, do all this, and you want us to now do this. And I, you know, I was seeing that a lot. That tends to be a big problem in healthcare when you're trying to, you know, make quality changes or quality improvement changes, and the staff is just, may not necessarily be resistant to it because they don't want to do it, but they just
Don't have the time.
don't feel like they have the time. So what happens then?
You gotta tweak it. You're gonna have to go back in and
You gotta get in
try to
there.
adjust the plan. Talk to your manager, your floor managers, your staff, and see in the order in which we can make it that change happen. So
And again, that's why it's important to try to involve people from every area during the planning process. So hopefully you won't have as much resistance going on. You know, if you had a few staff nurses or staff employees in on the planning process, they might be able to tell you right then, that's not going to be possible. You know, we only have 15 minutes to do X, Y, Z. We don't have time to add another step. So goals and objectives. We all know that with anything you do, you need to have some goals. Even, you know, as a student, I'm sure each of you all have goals for yourselves. Hopefully it's graduation. And, you know, obtaining a job or a career. So it's important that goals are specific. So, for example, if I say my goal is to graduate, is that a good goal? You say yes? What do you say?
It's generic.
Generic, what do you say?
Add a timeline to it.
Good goal? No? All right. I don't think it's a good goal because it is generic. It might, what if my goal is to graduate and I take 20 years to do it? Nothing wrong with taking 20 years, at least they finished, but 20 years?
But see, I was with her when she said put a timeline to it.
Right.
Actually give yourself a time limit on
You
how
gotta-
long you're going to present
graduate.
your
Now,
goal.
if I say my goal is to graduate 2014, is that a good goal?
Right.
Everybody agree? So it's important that you make your goals as specific as possible. Otherwise, you know, it will come out as being very generic. It'll be a lot easier not to ever meet your goal, or it might be easy to meet your goal because it is generic.
But it'll be like you don't have nothing to look forward to. You ain't working hard towards it.
Right.
You didn't set a date.
You need a target, which is where objectives come in. It's important that you do have targets so that you do feel accomplished along the way. You know, if my goal is still, you know, graduating in 2014, I may even want to say, but before then, I want to have my co-op done by fall 2013. So you want to make sure that you have steps along the way before you get to your goal so that it can help keep you motivated. And you want to use the same thing with your employees. When you're doing your evaluations with them or your annual survey of their performance, moving forward, when you're setting goals for them for the next year, you want to make sure that there's targets along the way and that they're very specific so that it's clear to everybody, both yourself as well as the employees, exactly what they need to do between now and the next year. Again, we just kind of talked about this. Objective kind of spells out what needs to be done. The really granular specifics. How much is to be done and by when must it be done. So those are your kind of your rules to get to your goal. So if we kind of combine everything we've been talking about so far, here are the elements of planning: vision, mission, goals, objectives, strategy, and action. Everybody knows what a mission is, hopefully. Gives you the purpose. Why is it that you're doing whatever you're doing? If you're in a hospital, your mission might be, or your purpose might be to provide care to patients, or provide care to uninsured or underserved patients. It basically clearly states why you exist, why you're there, why you're in business, why you're open. A vision, I always see a vision as something that's futuristic. Kind of tells where you're going, where you want to be. Kind of a prediction almost. And very popular quote. Has anybody ever heard it before? If we fail to plan, we plan to fail. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense, right?
It goes with life. If you don't have a plan in life, you don't have anything. You don't go anywhere. It's just floating away. So sad.
All right, we're gonna move into next chapter, or chapters 4 and 5. See how far we get today. So organization. Everybody ready? I think it was last Thursday we talked about how important the organization was. I believe it was Kay. He's not here today. As a manager, it's very important that you stay organized. Now, how you determine how that organization is, that's kind of based on you. Me, I need everything, organized in its place. There's other people that could completely have things, in a disaster, and they know exactly where it is. That's their, that's their organization. It works for them. That's fine. The key thing is to make sure that you personally know what works for you. Corporate values. We all have our own values, personal values, things that we believe in. But each organization will typically also have corporate values. Typically, they'll have a value statement that basically tells the same thing, what they believe in as a company, how they expect themselves to act, to perform, what are their ethics, their morals. So it's very similar to personal values, except on a grander corporate level. We just talked about our personal values. And so using those values, they need to transcend into how you manage your personal administration, which will include choosing employees, delegating, assigning work, scheduling, staffing, overtime, approving, coaching, counseling, disciplining. So imagine if you totally ignored your values and your corporate values and you try to do these tasks. Or it might happen, but
it's gonna be a mess.
Right. So it's important to make sure that when you're making these decisions and doing these tasks, that you're constantly integrating in the corporate values of the organization. It also helps that when you integrate the corporate values, that there is a sense of continuity. and you know there isn't any favoritism going on or discrimination, because before you make a decision, you're thinking about those corporate values. Does anybody know what span of control is? No? Span of control basically is your realm of everybody you control. So my span of control is pretty big. You know, I'm the chair of the department, so my span of control is basically every single one of you all. So I guess 150, 160 students. So it's basically the number of people you manage is what your span of control is. I've been in organizations where managers and supervisors were shifted around because the span of control wasn't fair. For instance, there might have been one manager whose span of control was 50 and another manager whose span of control was 2. Doesn't seem fair, right? And so sometimes you have to analyze those numbers and make changes. So what ended up happening was, you know, they notified certain employees and said, you know, moving forward from XYZ date, your manager will now be so-and-so. And for the employees, it's like, oh man, you know, especially if they like their manager, they don't always understand, you know, why the changes are happening, but sometimes this is the reason why. Because you want to make sure that span of controls are fair. They may not necessarily be equal all the time, but they do need to be fair. And you don't want, you know, one person feeling extremely overworked and then someone else only managing 2 people. You want to make sure that everybody's able to be efficient with their work and able to respond to everybody that they manage and be able to effectively manage them. So along with span of control, work assignment, they go hand in hand. You have to be able to effectively assign the work for everybody that you manage. So we're going to talk about this for a little bit because I think it's important. So it's, you know, several slides long. There's some key things that a supervisor or a manager needs to know when they're assigning work to their employees. The thing at the top is what's to be done. You gotta know what's to be done before you can assign it, right? What equipment and supplies are needed. How important is that?
Very important. If you don't have supplies and healthcare, you could be, whoo.
Think about you know, telling a nurse to go see these 10 patients and there's no gloves.
I've been there.
How did it make you feel?
Shit pissed me off. I mean, I've been in the spot to where I had to run my whole shift with no diapers. You know what I'm saying? It's just when you don't have supplies, your work is not able to get done because you have to constantly try to work around not having those certain supplies. Right. So it's kind of hard when you try to do your work day, and then for your employees to try to work with no supplies, it makes it even worse.
It's very key. And not just supplies, equipment too. You can't, you know, send somebody to imaging without knowing that the MRI is broken. You have to be, you know, aware of your equipment and your supplies before you can assign the work. What authority they have. That's important too, right? What quality and productivity requirements must be met. Very important. If you're assigning work and you tell them that it should take them 15 minutes to do it, but you know, haven't taken a look at the quality requirements, and had you taken a look at the quality requirements, you would know that it really should take them 25 minutes to do it. And you tell them to do it in 15 minutes, what's going to happen?
It's not going to get done.
It might not get done. What else?
Halfway.
Halfway.
Frustration on your.
What else?
Quality.
Quality. What about patient?
You're not going to get the best care.
Not going to get the best care. They're not going to be satisfied. So there's, you know, definitely a domino effect that can happen if you don't realize what the requirements are. All right, and how well, how quickly, and how economically the work must be done. All right. Other things they should know. Why must the work be done? How many times does the employee ask, why are we doing this? Have you ever asked that as an employee? Have you ever not gotten an answer? How did it make you feel?
Like I was shut out of the process.
Shut out of the process, what else? Like the manager doesn't know what they're doing, right? If you ask your boss, why are we doing this? And they're like, I don't know. Kind of makes you wonder, like, you know.
Or if they do this one, oh, it came from upper management. This
Right.
is what they told us.
So it's important, especially if you're trying to build a rapport with your staff. You should be able to speak to why you're telling them to do something, not just because I said do it. We all hated hearing that from our parents, right? I still hear it.
I think everybody did.
What the cost constraints are, also very key, especially now with lots of organizations having to do more with less. You can't just say, all right, we're gonna order 10 tests for this patient. You're telling your staff to do this without realizing how much that might cost, and without realizing they may not need all those tests. They may only need X, Y, and Z. Because what happens is, if you're doing this every day, you're not realizing what the cost constraints are, it's gonna add up. And then when they get that monthly report or that annual report and they see all those dollars lost, then we're in trouble, especially if we're in charge. So that was very important. Where each task is to be performed. Is that important? Why?
You need to know what area you're responsible to, you know, like, because it may be broken down into teams in certain areas.
If you're thinking in terms of healthcare, and we are in a healthcare management class, we have patients coming in every day, coming in, leaving, coming in, leaving. So it's always important to know where things are being done, because if you are just telling somebody to go do something and they need to be in this room and they're in this room, we may be holding a spot for a patient that needs to come in or have something done. And so what you're doing is you might be creating a bottleneck, and you may affect patient wait time, patient flow. So location is also important too. It's important to know where the task needs to be performed and that you tell the employee the right place to go. I've seen times where we had patient transporters that were told to go to one place and then ended up not being in the right place. And, you know, they're pushing patients around that are sick. And, you know, may not have been the most comfortable experience for that patient, just being wheeled around all these different places, not knowing where they were supposed to go, especially if they're connected to a tank or, you know, an IV or something like that. So,
They miss appointments. That's kind of bad for the facility and also the patient, because they're missing their treatment for the day.
right. Where supplies and service supports are found, that was pretty obvious. Let's look at this one. Where to obtain help when needed. How important is that?
It's very important.
Very important.
Especially for your floor employees, the ones that work hands-on with the patients. If there's no help when they need help, it's kind of bad for them, because then you kind of put them in a tough spot. And some of the places like that have to use lifts and stuff like that, they have to use 2 people. And if you don't have the help to use 2 people, and you'll get in trouble for using 1 person, it's putting your employees in a bad spot, because then they have to choose whether to do this or go do something else and then try to find help. So you have to make sure that help is there when they need that help.
And not only in terms of the employee, but again, our #1 customer is the patient. So if you are, you know, managing somebody that's supposed to be doing something for a patient, and when you give them the instructions or assign the work to them and they don't know where to go or where to find somebody for help, we could be costing a life. You just never know. Depends on the situation. So it's always, you know, even if it's, you know, you go do XYZ, I'll be in my office if you need me, or call me, or page me, or so-and-so is gonna be at the nurse's station. But you should always tell them where they can find help if they need it. All right, who does what? Important, right? Especially if we're thinking in terms of teams. We're thinking in terms of teams and we're assigning work. Everybody should know what everybody else is doing. That way everybody's on the same page and everybody's being efficient, and I'm not doing your job and my job when I could just be doing my job.
Right.
If I know that you're taking care of that, then I can know that all I have to do is what I have to do, right? When the work must be done. Deadlines. What if I assigned all this work and you had no clue when it was due? Would you be upset with me? Just a little bit?
I'll be upset, bald, going to see a psychiatrist for stress.
Stressed out. It happens. When changes must be made. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah.
What if we have Ms. Leslie doing a job, doing a poor job, sorry, doing a terrible job? You gotta know when to make changes, right? When to switch out. Maybe Leslie needs to be doing Mary's job, and Mary needs to be doing Leslie's job. We can't just let it go over our head or ignore it, because again, it always comes back to our customer, which is the patient. And if we don't do these things, we're either directly or indirectly going to affect the patient. And how the work is to be performed. It's not okay to just tell somebody to do something.
You
No.
gotta make sure they know how to do it.
Gotta make sure they know how to do it, or explain to them how to do it. Okay. How do we do that?
Training.
Train them. We might have to perform it for them. You know, sometimes when I get tasks, I'll also be providing an example. This is how it should be done. I even provide you guys with examples for assignments, with the hopes that it'll give you a better idea of how the work should be performed.
Some people learn better like that. Some people learn better if you show them how
Right.
to do it.
Yeah, definitely. So, here's some other critical things. We just went through a long list. You gotta make sure you have time, right? You can't just fire off tasks without saying, what else do you have today to do? Or how's your schedule for next week?
That's like, when is that ensure the employees has time available? Oh Lord, they need to learn that at health.
No, wait, we don't want to.
Not names, but I'm saying they need,
Okay.
at nursing homes, they need to learn how to ensure their employees have enough time available. It just is not enough time with the staffing they have on the hand. I've seen it too many times. It's just not enough time.
I think we can agree, though, that in healthcare, a lot of times we aren't going to have time. Everybody's always busy in healthcare. It's kind of, a known thing, but I think it's still important to evaluate time. We may all be busy, but maybe Michelle's more busy than Ms. Burgess, right? So maybe we can, maybe you can take the task today, but maybe tomorrow it'll be opposite. Maybe you'll be more busy than she is. So it's important to know the availability. Training, we already talked about training, very important. You can't assign something if the person has no clue how to do it. I can't tell somebody to make me a table if they have never used Microsoft Excel before, right? So important to have the training. Explain the assignment. Many times I've been told to do something and nobody explained to me the assignment. Just said do it. I was completely lost. And sure, you know, we can fiddle through and try to figure it out on our own, but how much time will we save if things had just been explained to us, right? Provide complicated orders in writing. Always helps, right? I always wonder how many people have been to a Waffle House? Everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
No?
I don't like Waffle House.
But you've been there.
Yeah.
Everybody been there. Have you seen how they operate? You give them your order. They don't write anything down really, right? They just stand there and they call it out. I always wonder like how they never mess up, right? Especially if it's a big order. We don't really want the Waffle House approach in healthcare. We want to make sure that, especially if it's a complicated assignment or a complicated order, that we put it in writing for several reasons. Can anybody give me a few?
I think sometimes people don't have, like for me, it's easier for me to see it in black and white than just to hear it only. Because sometimes I'm not paying attention, I don't have the, you know, I'm not grabbing everything I need. But if I have it in black and white, you know, on paper, I can go back and make, you know, check, did it, you know, like a checklist.
Okay.
For accuracy.
Accuracy? Okay.
Put it in writing, because if it's not done right, you can always go back and be like, well, I put it in writing how to do it and what to do.
And in healthcare.
As a manager, you always want documentation, paper trail. And if it's a complicated order, more than likely it's something important. So if it doesn't get done, we want to be able to have documentation that it wasn't done, even though we gave them the assignment, we put it in writing, it still wasn't done. Alert the employee to potential problems. How do y'all feel about that one?
It's important to keep your employees, if they don't know that there is a problem, they're not going to ever change that problem. Whether it has to deal with the patient, or it has to deal with their attitude, or they're coming into work late. If you don't address the problem or let them know that it's becoming a problem, it's never going to change. So it's just going to keep going on and on and on, and then you're still going to have the problem.
Right.
Or you can use it in terms of like, say, we're short on gloves. That's going to be a potential problem today. We need to try to find some gloves in the blue.
Turn them inside out.
Right.
Just kidding.
Somebody needs to run to the store.
Right. Yeah, I think people are able to operate, you know, better if they know that there may be some potential, even if it's to the point where we have 100 patients signed to come in today. We may be busy. There may be backlog. It's always important to, you know, communicate, I think, beforehand so that employees in their mind are ready or prepared for the worst. Even if it doesn't happen, at least they know that it's potentially could happen.
And they should have meetings, like, you know, when they come in before they shift.
Staff meeting?
Yeah.
And assign a complete task rather than breaking it up. I don't know how I feel about this one. I'm kind of on the fence. Sometimes I think that breaking up a task might be easier. I think it depends on the employee and how they learn and how they operate.
Or how big the task is.
How big the task is. Then in some other cases, breaking it up might not make you the most efficient. Sometimes you just need to go ahead and give them the complete task and tell them everything. And then if they want to break it up personally, then fine. But what else might breaking it up do? Thinking in terms of the manager. If you break up a task,
They could put the task behind. It might not get completed by the end of the day.
might not get completed by the end of the day. We're a manager, we're always getting pulled places. If I'm telling you if the task is A, B, C, and D, and I only give you A, and for whatever reason I get pulled into a meeting and I'm unable to give you B, C, and D, what happens?
I'll complete A and B, C, and D is not getting done.
It's not getting done, right? So, you know, there could be some problems to breaking up the task, especially in terms of management. We're employees, that'd be different. But you're always going to get pulled. There's always going to be things happening. You might get pulled in on a call. You may have to go to another hospital or nursing home for whatever reason to go fill in for somebody else. You just never know. So I think in more situations than not, assigning the complete task is probably going to be more beneficial. All right, so informal organization. We have informal organization here, right? There's pretty much one in every organization. It's nothing official, nothing formal, but it's there. It may be those people that have worked there 20 years, 30 years. It's kind of informal. We also have informal leaders. Again, people that have been there 20 years, 30 years, may not have any titles, but they've been there so long that they've established a sense of leadership among other people. Maybe, you know, to employees that have only been there for a year, maybe they look up to that person that's working there for 20 years, even if they're not their boss. They could be their coworker. Sometimes I think informal leaders are more effective than the formal ones. They sometimes tend to have more influence. And to me, influence has a lot to do with leadership. Coordinating. Process of synchronizing activities to make sure that everything flows smoothly, right? We think about this in terms of management and assigning tasks. You may not necessarily just want to say, okay, you do one task, you do one task, you do one task. You want to kind of coordinate to make sure that, again, there's no duplicate work going on, nobody's stepping on anybody else's feet, doesn't cause any fighting. So it's a process. It's not just something that you just kind of do. It actually should be something that takes some thought and time into putting it together. Controlling. You might know what controlling is. It's like kind of like the dark, bad word, because it often involves correction. Controlling could be, don't come to my class late anymore. We're correcting the action of you being late. That was just an example. You know, you're on time. I think we'll stop there. We'll pick up chapter 5 on Thursday.
We don't have school visits, do we? It says Martin Luther King Day, student holiday.
Thursday?
And you know what? That's what I wanted to ask too, because